Thank you. Looks like we've got a good turnout here. And let me do one more thing. So I'd like to welcome you all to Nature Connects. Nature Connects, as you may know, is TNC's webinar series that connects you with scientists, experts, influencers, and our partners from the United States and around the world. So thank you all for joining us today. So I'm Craig Lesher. I'm the Director for Monitoring and Evaluation for TNC's Africa program, and I'm the host for today. So here at the Nature Conservancy, we're dedicated to creating a healthier planet for all. We work locally and globally using innovative science and scalable, long-lasting solutions to tackle the most complex environmental challenges facing our warming planet. We know that what we're doing on the ground to protect nature will mean a better future for people and the planet. We've got an exciting program for you today. We'll be learning about TNC's work in the grasslands of northern Tanzania. This is the home of the iconic Serengeti, Ngorongoro Crater, and the Maasai people. Alphonce Mallya, TNC's Northern Tanzania program lead, and Francis Masolo, TNC's livestock expert in Northern Tanzania, will talk today about how people and wildlife coexist in these grasslands and the growing threats from invasive species of plants and overgrazing of livestock. Before we dive into today's program, I want to share a little more about our guests. Alphonce Mallya's experience with TNC is as old as TNC Africa itself. He was one of our first employees in Africa, and Alphonce grew professionally over the last 12 years at TNC, working his way up through a series of jobs to become the Northern Tanzania Rangeland Initiative Conservation Coordinator in 2019. And in 2021, Alphonce became the Northern Tanzania Program Director. Francis Masolo has more than 15 years of experience in the livestock and agriculture sectors. For the last 4 years at the Nature Conservancy, Francis has been the livestock marketing and grazing manager, where he oversees a project that focuses on improving rangeland management within TNC's Northern Tanzania program. During the talk today, as you think of questions, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the talk, we'll have some time to answer some of your questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. And Alphonce, I'll turn it over to you to share your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, everyone. Okay, thank you so much. Welcome to Northern Tanzania. Oops, sorry. Welcome to Northern Tanzania. As Craig said, we're going to talk about the grasslands for livestock and wildlife here in our landscape. My name is Alphonce Mallya, the program director. So the elephant you're seeing there is from Serengeti National Park, which is also in our landscape. And in this slide, we're welcoming you to Tanzania, the land of kind people, the amazing national parks and epic wildlife and pristine beaches. Our landscape here is about 3.5 million hectares. And over half of communal grazing area is shared here by people, livestock, and wildlife. And it serves as an area for wildebeest migration, about 20,000. It's the third largest wildebeest migration in East Africa after the Serengeti in South Sudan. And it takes place annually. It's home to over 4,000 elephants. And we also host the Great East Africa Rift Valley, where Tarangire, Lake Manyara National Park, and the Lake Natron area, which is home to the breeding site of the flamingos, are found. The Northern Tanzania Rangeland Initiative is a consortia of organizations working here in partnership with TNC and communities to transform the approaches into conservation in a way that sustains the people and wildlife in the landscape. And we are focusing in this landscape because 80% of all wildlife habitat is on communal land. So the map you are seeing to the right there, the beige color is all communal land and the green ones are protected areas. So 80% of wildlife actually is found outside protected area where there's people, livestock, and farming. And community conservation here means regenerating healthy grassland for livestock and wildlife. And the photo you are seeing to your left there is the Maasai household. So you can see all these the Maasai houses, and in the middle is the place where they enclose their livestock at night to protect them from wild animals such as lion and leopards. Why are we focusing on cattle? The majority of the communities here are pastoralists, the Maasai, and to them, livestock remains the center feature of their culture and economy. As we call it, quote unquote, a walking bank, cattle bring respect, power, and prestige to the communities here. The dowries are often referred in the number of cattle, but also the more cattle you have, the more wealthier you are seen and being considered. And in turn, the more respect from other community members. So in general, the men are responsible for taking cattle out to graze, and the women are responsible for milking cows and tending to livestock that is left at home. The challenges we're facing here in the landscape, we have growing pressures on grassland, and this is due to the growing population. There's more people, there's more cattle, there's also more wildlife. There's irresponsible rangeland governance. There's conflicts over land use, and this is due to lack of zoning for livestock, farming, settlement, forests, and other development activities. There's random grazing that leads to overgrazing and degradation. We are also being faced by increased bare land, and this is due to livestock and wildlife competition, increasing dominance of unpalatable grass and other invasive plant species, unhealthy livestock, and this then causes a negative impact to the livelihood in the communities here. So from here, from the next slide onwards, I will welcome my colleague, Francis, to take us through. The photo you're seeing there is communities uprooting one of the invasive plant species in our landscape. Welcome, Francis.
Thank you very much, Alphonse. My name is Francis Insolo, the livestock and grazing manager in this program. So I'll take through the rest of the slides, starting with the opportunities. As my colleague has mentioned, that there are so many challenges which we are facing, but also we have an opportunities which are enabling the program to improve our grassland management and livestock. And one of them is the sustainable grazing, which is very possible in this landscape. Of course, having this grazing area and a place is the place whereby through the customer certificate of rights of occupants, which is the policy which favor the zoning kind of program, it's one of the opportunities which help us, the program, to develop a grazing plan in these areas. Another opportunity that we are having in our program is the community-based natural resource management in place. So through the program which we are doing, we do have this community-based natural resource management in place, which enhances the program to move on. But also we have a very strong community governance capacity and the platform for the decision making, which enable the community to make the decision on how best they can use the grazing area for better approach. And also through the livestock, the community has a strong appetite for the fattening program. So all these are main or major opportunities what we are having in this landscape, which make the program to do better. And if we get some more support, we'll be able to improve our grassland management and livestock. What are the key approaches which we are using in our program? As you can see in the picture there, you find the communities are trying to learn on how best they can plan when it comes to grazing management plan. So through learning, we are building on traditional approaches, the new tools for the dry and wet season plan. So you find the community members, they are planning, they are zoning their areas to develop the dry and the wet season plan, depend with the season of that season plan. But also the approach we're using as participation is to get getting the key stakeholders on board for sustainable grazing plan. This involves traditional leaders, grazing committee members, women and youth, and government leaders during the planning session. But also, as we are dealing with the pastoralists, the other approach which are looking at is the mindset. So we are trying to make effect and long-lasting changes to the Maasai community to learn this approach for the better of their life and their livestock. And last is the market, because we're trying to see how we can improve the access to market to reduce the livestock pressure on the resources and reduce the drought and increase the family income. So these are the major 4 approaches which we are implementing in this program. Through learning, we are mainly talking about the eco-literacy. What do we mean by eco-literacy? Through eco-literacy, it's the basic ecosystem process that determines the land health and the productivity. In this, we are trying to see how the community understood the context and teaching the method which are being used through the capacity of doing things. But also the general approach here, which we are using, is the holistic grazing management approach, which aim in generating the rangeland health, meaning that the biophysical regeneration of rangeland health must be placed within the local condition and local knowledge, without forgetting the community mobilization, whereby the grazing committee and grazing coordinators, together with the livestock keepers, are being organized in developing the detailed calendar and spatial planning. Through learning, of course, we are facilitating the communities to elect these grazing coordinators, who are the drivers to oversee the planning session in each village, which support the development of wet and dry season during the planning season. So at the end of the day, we make sure that we develop grazing plan for wet and dry season. Next. Yeah, and our participation, as you can see in that picture, you find a woman who we think through engaging the traditional leaders as influential leaders during the planning process. This is the area whereby we think for the sustainability of the program, building the capacity of local partners to facilitate the process with the communities. And of course, the community have been engaged in different exchange visits for learning, including women and youth and some partners through the process. But at the end of the day, we make sure that we obtain official endorsement for the adoption of the approach by the community governing bodies, so that it can be owned by the village council in each village. And the mindset, as I've been saying, that TNC recognize that the ongoing initiative of the grassland management may not be itself to solve the problem. So there is the issue of culture. So there is a need to change the Maasai headers ideology from cattle holding to valuing cattle as a community managed commercial. So through this, we had training, which is based on principle of adult learning. We are trying to facilitate the sub-villages to develop grazing blocks. We are trying to provide the certified training for the grazing coordinators for the sustainabilities. And of course, the monitoring tools and the access of grass condition. As you can see here, this is the one of our M&D officer who is trying to train one of our grazing coordinator on how to collect data and share the data for the decision making. Next. No, before the invasive species. Yes, we are looking at on the issue of marketing because it has been proven that the improved livelihood and income can help to improve the natural resources and management. So TNC is proposing a business model that will support community to raise cattle in their natural environment, which will improve the livestock value chain and create improved marketing access. So this approach will encourage the community to avoid holding cattle. So the issue of good quality with the veterinary care access for the cattle is the key. That's why we are trying also to train these community members on how they can deal with animal health cattle, assessing the practice, veterinary services, and linking them to the market. So from the money they get from their cattle, they'll be able to support their families and also conserve the area which they're working on. So this is the area which we think as one of the best key approaches which we are focusing on. Next. Yeah, under invasive species control. Of course, invasive species are the plants that affect forage availability and growth, which reduce the grazing area for wildlife and livestock, and is being the second threat to global biodiversity. So invasive species control will inform management practice toward the restoration of the native ecosystem. So TNC have tried to support the uprooting of more than 100 and 300 acres, which produced palatable grasses for livestock and wildlife to these areas which we have tried to do it or to work on. In that photo, you see the landscape in one of the community called Terat. This is the area which is the key breeding ground for the zebra and wild beast. So mothers are protective of their infant zebra and wild beast. Invasive species plants have taken over the landscape. So we are trying to do a lot in this area so that to control this invasive species so that we can increase number of grazing area for the wildlife and the livestock. Next. Next slide. Yeah, this is the case study for Selela village. This guy which you are seeing, he is one of our best grazing coordinator. Actually, he's an 45 years old traditional leaders, which is well-respected livestock keeper and having a livestock. Normally, what we are doing, we are trying to support them with the motorcycle and a smartphone so that they are voluntarily monitor the grazing area and take some pictures and share the pictures of the areas to see if the area has been improved so that they can make the decision for the next planning for the next season. So this is the one of the grazing coordinator, which we are supporting them to make sure that they make a follow-up and really do a good job in the landscape. Next. Yeah, what are the key areas of focus? Key areas of focus are land management as eco literacy. This is one of the best area we are focused on doing this program. Effective community engagement, focusing on building local ownership This support us to establish the Pastoralist Association to oversee the program as an exit strategy. Focusing on market access and return have shown the surplus to these communities that they benefit from the livestock which they're having. Of course, for now, we are trying to see how we can focus much on developing the memorandum of understanding with the neighbors community so that they can share resources and reduce the conflict among the communities. But also, as I have said, one of the major challenges which we are having is the issue of invasive species. So we are thinking to focus much on the invasive species control for the health rangeland in our landscape. Next. Yeah, what are the impact to date? So far, 1.3 million acres are under improved grassland management, and we have been able to support or to reach more than 41,000 people in this program. The program has reduced the percentage of bare land, which is associated with soil erosion by reducing the rangeland and overgrazing, but also through the livestock to market model, we have been able to balance the stock number with carrying capacity and reduce the competition for the pasture among the livestock and between the livestock and wildlife. And of course, healthy stock that fits the good market to their community so that they gain more money from what they have been produced to them. As you can see in the photo there, this is the key area also for breeding ground for zebra and wildebeest. They are located area for livestock grazing and farming. Next. Yeah, looking ahead, we are looking on expansion our holistic grazing management for more communities and replicate this good job to other areas. Looking to have the joint grazing agreement with the neighbors to avoid conflict, expanding our invasive species control program to more communities, expansion of our livestock to market program, and of course, a sustainable financing soil carbon to 50 more villages. Thank you very much. Asanteni sana. You are welcome.
Thank you, Francis and Alphonse. And Francis, just a big heartfelt thank you. I know it's always nervous. This is one of your first presentations to a North America audience. And yes, I know it's very nerve-wracking to do these things, but thank you for agreeing to help out today. I appreciate it. Alphonse, of course, you've done this a number of times over the years, and so thank you for all of that. So if you have questions now, you can put them into the Q&A box at the bottom. We've got a couple of questions already, but let's kick it off with a question for Alphonse about how has learning sustainable grazing practices impacted local people's lives? Are there any stories you can share about this? You may be, oh, there you go.
Yes, learning has created some significant changes here. We've seen more and more communities adapting to better approaches and, approaches that are promising the sustainability that we are aiming at here. Just, as an example, there's one community that we started with, and now where they are now, they have business plans, they have sustainability plans, And most of it all, their accountant has a CPA, which is the certification for public accountants here in Tanzania. And the program manager, the business manager for that community is almost graduating from his master's in community development. So you can see, none of us discussed with these communities on the needs for these skills, but they seen the gaps and decided, we should for sure pursue this.
Thank you, Alphonse. So we had a question in the chat about how's the team dealing with the current drought? And Francis, perhaps you could talk about what's happening in the current drought and what we're doing to help the local people. First, tell us how bad is the current drought, because many people may not know what the conditions are like there right now.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Yeah, actually, for the past 2 years, we experienced a very severe drought in our areas, and because the program support few villages and the other villages are not under the program. So when drought hit, it doesn't select that this is the village under the program and these are villages who are not in the program. So in the Maasai community, normally they are looking for the pastures. So when it's come to the drought, they actually don't abide to the planning which are in place. So you find the livestock are moving from one village to other, just looking for the grasses. So it came that there is a difficulty in getting the pasture for the livestock. So what we are trying to do is to see how best we can harvest enough forest during the wet season and make a bale and store them so that during the drought now, they can use that supplies of grasses just to feed their livestock. And at the same time, we are looking on how best we can support them with the feedlot program. That means supporting with supplement during the drought season. That's why we are partnering with some organization who are doing better in feedlot program, so that this will at least have tried to reduce the burden for the pastoralists during that process of severe drought. But for the sustainability, we're thinking of the livestock to market, to sell the more cattle during the wet season when they are fat, they are good health, so that they can reduce number of livestock instead of being with a huge number of livestock during the dry season. Altogether, we are trying to see which best we can do. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah. So we've also got a question about gender and about women, and we know that it's usually the men who own the livestock in this geography, and but we also know that oftentimes it's the women who are the ones that are in charge of grazing the sheep and the goats, and the women often have the rights to the milk from the livestock. Talk to us about how this project has integrated women into the rangeland management and into our activities. And Alphonse, I'm not sure who best on your team to answer that, but you can answer yourself or delegate it to one of the others who are on the call.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for the question. I will respond and then I'll leave it to my team to do some additions. Probably Filippo can give us some backing that data here. In all the work that we are doing here, we proactively make sure that there's an involvement of community members from all the age groups, the aspects, the women, the youth, the elders, the traditional leaders as well, the government leaders and everybody. And in the community structure here, there's also responsibilities for everybody in there. So making sure that whatever we do, all the work that we do with the communities here touches those aspects, but also gives the opportunity, an equal opportunity for everybody to actually participate and provide their inputs, but take also the ownership. And we've seen a lot of changes in this angle as well. I happened to sit in one of the election gathering for one of the communities as well early this year, and there was a quick discussion on the previous election, and the women said, you men are always, taking over more positions than us. And the men laughed and said, we saw you tricking us in the last election, and we had to give in because we knew that you also have the equal representation. And for me, having been in this landscape for that long, this was so touching because one of my first meetings, actually women sat on the ground and spoke nothing. Even when we poked for them to contribute, they said, no, it's fine. The men have already contributed on our behalf. So fast forwarding that to where we are today, I see a lot of changes and, great promising direction.
Would anybody else on the Northern Tanzania Rangeland Initiative team like to add to that? Filippo, do you perhaps want to talk about the data we collect about how we empower women? He may not be, okay. So I guess that's a no, or he's, okay, he's putting it in the chat here.
Yes, Greg, yeah. Sorry, I think my mic was off. So on the same landscape, our partner UCRT have also established quite a big number of women right and leadership forum, and through this, women are empowered to influence decisions regarding the grazing resources, and we are using the same fora to also raise the women voices on other aspects like the tradition of not allowing these women to own resources. And during last 2 weeks, I was with Francis on the landscape, and we were going through these villages, trying to engage them in issues regarding to establishing strong institutions. And through establishment of this institution, we are also thinking around the community, the representation, and thinking around involving or engaging or including women in these high-level decision-making bodies. And apart from that, under the monitoring, I'm the monitoring and evaluation specialist for the Northern Tanzania program. And as part of the monitoring works, we are also thinking of including more women in this task, and especially in the area of invasive species control, because that is the areas they can actually easily reach and collect this data. So we have started to train more women into this, and we have one of the female supervisor in one of our villages in Monduli, who is actually doing a great job in doing this, in supervising the invasive species control. So the women involvement is the core of our activity. And given the hardship on the landscape, the landscape is very huge and is very harsh sometimes. But we are thinking on around those activities that the women can actually take roles without endangering their lives. For the grazing coordination, that is the part of the job that we don't want them to get involved, because it actually involves moving long distances with motorbike, trying to enforce the grazing plans and those issues. So we are doing a great job and trying to find the activities which women they can contribute better. And in our forthcoming project, we also have some kind of conservation enterprises where we are actually thinking of establishing women and youth groups in over 50 community institutions, in over 50 villages. And under this institution, they will be able to, will build their capacities on other business ventures like beekeeping and leather crafts, so that they can generate additional income apart from livestock. So that way, I think we will be able to reach a big number of women and youth and balance the gender aspect. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Filippo. And it's a good segue into the next question about invasive species. So Alphonse, can you talk to us about where are these invasive species coming from? Is there a way we can stop the invasion at the source?
Thank you, Craig. That too is a good question. We have different kinds of invasive plant species in the landscape. And we are still working on studying to understand the exact sources. But so far, it's understandable that, most of them came as a result of soil destruction, soil degradation, so disturbance on the soil, but also dispersal agents, livestock, vehicles, and probably also the maize seeds that came to the landscape from different areas. They come at different heights as well. In the same landscape, you find an invasive plant species which is probably to a person's knee height, but in the same landscape, a different location, you find the same, which is, it's like a forest. So you can see, with these differences, we're asking ourselves, is it probably this other village where they're huge, where, it all started and is expanding? But also we are learning that they are occupying more and more land. Often you'd hear people saying human, livestock and wildlife population increase, creates these tensions over resource use. And not a lot people would also refer to the invasive plant species, which are also, taking over land that would have been used by palatable plant species for both wildlife and livestock, and also land that would have been used for other human activities as well. So they are also contributing to the shrinkage of access to land and other resources in our landscape. They occupy about 41% of our 3.5 million acres. So it's quite a huge chunk. Warda can add on since she's our invasive species guru here.
Okay. On top of what Alphonse has mentioned, we have learned that poor grazing practices also contribute to the spread of these invasive species. And the other question was how to stop this. So far, according to the thorough literature review we did, we are now using mechanical removal as one of the way of controlling these invasive species. I think Francis has mentioned how far we have gone on controlling this. So, yeah.
Thank you, Warda. We've got a follow-up question. Are tourists a source of contamination for these invasive species? Do they help spread it or did they help introduce it?
Yeah, we can say that. For example, the Parthenium hydrophorus, which is currently dominating the northern Tanzania landscape. It was first reported at Kilimanjaro International Airport, and it is obvious that it is due to the tourists coming in Tanzania. So they can contribute. So
that's interesting that it started there near the airports, the international airports for this region. That's fascinating. Okay, so we've got a question now about population. So the people in this geography, is the overall population increasing? Is it stable? Is it decreasing? Talk to us about how that's changing or how it's changed in over the last decade or so. Alphonse, you want to take this one and maybe Filippo can add?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that we are headed to a national census this year, towards the end of this year. So most of our response here will be based on our last census. So far, it looks like the human population is increasing. Filippo can provide us with some baking data on this. Karibu, Filippo.
Asante, Alphonse. Yeah, the population is definitely increasing, and it is increasing at an alarming rate. I think 2012, the population on this landscape was below 200,000, but we are now recording over 400,000 people on the landscape. So it is like more than doubled the population in 2012.
Yeah, we know it's growing fast because there's open land and agriculture is also expanding in this area as people move in. So we know it's vital then that we get the communities the long-term rights to their land. And Alphonse, can you talk a little bit about the CCROs and how we get people long-term rights to manage their lands, and that way they can ensure they don't get converted to agriculture?
Yes, sure, Craig. So traditionally, the communities here, the livestock keepers would allocate portions of their lands for livestock grazing over different seasons of the year, the wet and dry seasons, as Francis had mentioned earlier. And these were governed using the traditional approaches, and it's a reason that they sustained for a while. But it's unfortunate that our national law does not recognize the traditional approaches and systems. So if somebody who is not from that community, for example, goes to the community areas, you see this pristine landscape. You can see my background there is from one of the community areas. And you feel like maybe I should own this piece of land because it doesn't seem like it belongs to anybody. You would obviously contact the government authority to have access to that land. And because the communities only use their traditional approach, then the government can issue ownership, the title deed for ownership, to this other person who went to the government, which means then the communities lose in this approach. So what we've been doing is working with the communities and partners to strengthen their traditional mechanisms and systems, and then overlay that with the legally recognized certificate, a title deed from the government that says, this land belongs to this community, and it also specifies the land use practices that the communities have decided together for that specific land, which is grazing.
Alphonse, can you tell us how many of these certificates of customary rights of occupancy the Northern Rangeland Trust, or sorry, Northern Rangeland Initiative has been able to secure in the last, say, 10 years?
Not having the exact figure off of my head, but I think what would make it more interesting is probably asking Filippo to share the actual size, the actual total size that is composed of all the CCRO, customary right of occupancy, that we've actually secured in our landscape.
Yes, Alphonse. I think up to date we have secured around 1.4 million hectares.
Yeah.
That is roughly about 3 million acres of communal grazing areas. Those are the areas we can say they are legally protected under the customary certificate, or the customary land tenure rights. Mm-hmm. And it covers at least around 80 villages to date. Yeah.
So we're about halfway, really.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Alphonse. So can you tell us more about how some communities are seeing benefits from carbon sequestration, both from soil and grasslands?
Yes. So far, we are only advanced on the forest carbon. And in total, about $3 million have been issued to the communities from protecting their lands. Now it becomes more interesting because these are the same area that the communities would protect for access to pasture for their livestock, but also the same areas are being used for wildlife in different seasons, and are the same areas that are used to calculate and sequester, pay for that carbon money. We've just finished preparing for a soil carbon project that would cover 50 villages. And we are commencing a 4-year journey towards working with those communities to establish that. And what this means is even the communities in area where there's only grasslands, there's no forests, now they can benefit from the carbon revenue, but also it acts as an incentive for them to continue protecting their grazing lands.
Thank you, Alphonse. We've just
Welcome.
got time for a couple more questions here before we close. But let's so talk to us, Alphonse, about how the learning here in northern Tanzania, how you share it with other partners in northern Tanzania, and also other initiatives within Africa. So talk to us about the dissemination of what you guys are learning within the geography where you work and also externally.
The key lesson here is when we go to communities, we don't just go there and say, you guys need to do this, you guys need to do this. We go to them with an open eye, open ear, and open heart to listen to their challenges, but also to listen to what they're proposing as solutions to those. And, you know, our approaches has always been this one. And that has created a relationship that is, you know, it goes beyond professional. You know, it's a personal now. You know, a community member is a family member now. And, you know, we are seeing more and more communities from other places wanting to come and learn. We've seen communities who want to establish the similar approaches for example, last week, the community's representatives from northern Kenya asked if they could actually come for some lessons. We've spent a couple of weeks in Namibia visiting community conservation areas, and we had about 30 representatives from community conservation areas across Africa. And, you know, through that exchange, you know, discussions, we've learned, you know, that we are way advanced in terms when it comes to community conservation, because almost everybody always came to us and say, you know, we liked that approach, we liked this approach in Tanzania, and would wish actually to adapt to those. And we found, for example, the community representatives that we were lucky to bring along with us was quite bright, you know, and he would share insights that others felt that, you know, were useful and adaptive. So as we are now, we're expecting potentially community visits from Namibia, from South Africa, from Kenya, from Botswana, and you know, it's just amazing to see this, basically.
Thank you, Alphonse. Let's pivot back on the questions for a minute to agriculture. So we have a question in the chat about, is there industrial agriculture that's coming into the region? Or is it still primarily just small scale agriculture? So is there industrial agriculture? And if so, is it from outside, such as you know, China coming in to work in some of the geographies on the land?
We are not seeing much of that magnitude in the specifics of the landscape, because it's dry lands. Acknowledging that there is water, underground water. So if they wanted to come, they would. And it's the reason that we're, you know, working hard day in, day out with the communities to help them secure the resource rights. And this is mainly land. So that, and also land use planning, so that in case they have an investor, then they can allocate as communities to an area zoned for agriculture. Historically, the government had allocated some sizable parcels, not huge, but maybe 3,000 acres, 5,000 to individuals for farming as an idea to help generate food for the country back then. But most of those had proven failure because it's rain-fed agriculture. So it's land size dependency than the technology that intensifies in one area to leave other areas for conservation and other uses. So we're not seeing yet, but potentially they could come.
Okay, thank you, Alphonse. So we got a quick question here for our last one. Are any members of TNC's Northern Tanzania team Maasai?
Filippo.
I am here.
We have Filippo, we have Lucas, they're both Maasai. So we have two of them here. And, you know, one left when the project closed, so he went back to school. Yeah.
And Alphonse, can you talk a little bit about your heritage and like, do you come from a pastoralist background as well?
I didn't. I'm a Chaga from Kilimanjaro, but my parents moved here when, you know, Christianity was being brought to northern Tanzania, and back then Christianity was spread together with conservation. So I actually, quote unquote, inherited conservation from my dad because I learned from him, and it became my passion. Good thing is I grew up in the landscape here, and I traveled with my dad to most places. And when I started this work for the Nature Conservancy, I started telling him that now I'm going to this village, and you know, from his experience saying, oh, you'll go to this gorge, there's a nice forest and some elephants, and then you go there, you find, you know, a highly degraded landscape. No elephants, nothing. You know, for me, that gave me a drive and a passion more and more to continue working here. And we're seeing impacts. We're seeing those areas coming back. So hopefully, probably someday I'll give him a drive out there so he can continue the inspiration.
And the last question for you, Alphonse, is when people that are tuning in today, how can they support your work in northern Tanzania?
Thank you. That's a good question. They could support us by contacting Mandy. If I can quickly share screen here.
I'll put her name in the chat here.
Okay.
Okay. So this is Andy, and here's her email address as well. And as I think we also, am I right? We have some one-to-one matching opportunities now as well.
Yes.
Your gift is matched by another donor one-to-one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you all for coming today. And yeah, it was great to see we got a wonderful turnout here, and thank you all for your support for the Nature Conservancy. I've been here 19 years, and it's an amazing organization that does phenomenal work on the ground. And of course, your support is what makes all this possible. And so we'll be sending everybody a follow-up email over the coming days with links to the resources we talked about, and there's going to be a recording of this webinar. And if you are enjoying our webinars, please share them with your friends. And you can join us for our next webinar on Wednesday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. And we're going to be chatting about TNC's Oceans and Coasts Network, Oceans and Coasts Network, or OCN. And this is a program that connects our efforts and those of our partners through these three vast geographies: the South Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. So we're going to be hearing from the OCN director, Mary Conley, along with three of TNC's leading marine and coastal specialists from across this newly formed network to find out how collectively, what can we do to help make the world and the oceans a better place where both people and nature thrive together. So you don't want to miss this. So sign up if you haven't already for these sessions at nature.org/MA webinars. So thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.